right, are we ready?
We're ready.
Okay. All right then. So, one of the things that I got.
What's your name?
My name is Sarah Mavrelis.
Hi, Sarah. Marc English.
Hello.
Nice to meet you.
Why don't we say a little bit?
Did you say
about
Mavrelis?
Mavrelis.
Is that Italian?
It's Greek, actually.
Greek from.
And I'm not Greek.
Oh, really?
My husband is.
Ah, what's your maiden name?
Brill, which is English.
Brill. Okay. Which leads right into Marc English.
It does.
What a segue.
So, why don't we start off by just telling me a little bit about who you are?
Oh, you're going to have to give me a more pointed question because I
Okay.
can go way too many directions on that.
You're a designer.
Professionally speaking, I get paid for doing graphic design.
Okay.
I've been a graphic designer for 30 plus years. I've been an educator for maybe more than 25. Went to Massachusetts College of Art, class of '86, communication design. The day I graduated, I had not even received my diploma, and the head of the department says, if you ever want to teach, come on back. And I was thinking, what the fuck? I don't even have my diploma yet. So that put the bug in my head, and I always loved education. And I got involved with AIGA, and when I was sitting on the board of directors there, a faculty member at New England School of Art and Design asked me if I would teach there. I started teaching corporate identity there. Then Mass Art heard I was in the education field, so they brought me in over there. And I've been in Texas for 20 years, the last 9 years teaching in a undergraduate program with the Academy of Art University. Taught a couple semesters down at University de Monterrey in Monterrey, Mexico. And some other schools that do not need the hype. So I've been doing that for a long time, and that kind of pays the bills.
Okay. So as a student, one of the things that I'm very interested in is process, and I noticed one of the things that you have on your website is this thing called the Way of the Shaman.
Ah, yes.
Design.
Yes.
So I was wondering if you could tell me, without going into all of the details, because there's a very, very good explanation about what it is on the website. How did you come up with the process, and how do you feel it works in practice?
Are you talking about the notion of the way of the design shaman?
Yes.
Back when I was in college, when I was at Mass Art, I was working on a senior research project, and I was trying to think, what's the oldest graphic design in the United States? The oldest graphic design in the United States was done by Native Americans. And much like this, it's on walls. But it's 1,000 years old, it's 2,000 years old. And the people who left those marks, their job, they weren't the hunters, they weren't the gatherers, they were usually the ones like with a hump on their back because they'd been touched by God, so they were weird, or had a limp in their leg, so they really couldn't, they weren't any good at the hunt. But they were kind of creative too, and they probably all wore black. And so they were the ones who would leave these markings on the wall to kind of explain the role of the world to the people. And I remember once when I was at Mass Art, I was actually painting up a gallery with life-size petroglyphs, which is where it's carved in stone, from what is called Butler Wash in Utah. And I looked out in the street, and I saw a sign for a restaurant. Well, right behind me, I had just carved what was a net with a bighorn sheep. So 1,000 years ago, they would carve a bighorn sheep and say, which means this is a good place to get sheep. Outside, you look at a sign that says, oh, this is a good place to grab a burger. So what we're doing is the exact same thing as they did then. So the way of the shaman is to find some path between, you know, the earth and the cosmos.
Okay.
And pretty much trying to deal with patterns of the people and things like that. So what we do is ancient stuff. And earlier you'd asked me a question about technology. So the technology 1,000 years ago was stone. The things that have changed, because you can still find these panels all around the world, is we no longer understand what they mean. Since they didn't have a written language, the only documents are these stones. So we may have clues, and the thing now is to, well, there's so much documentation that you can explain things, but as I tell my students, you can't design a poster or anything else and stand there beside it and explain it. they have to figure, the audience has to figure it out.
Mhm.
So it's a whole different thing. How's that for a run-on answer?
That's great. After taking a look at some of your designs, you seem to have something which I as a student would call like simple brilliance, where it is only enough information as is needed and not a pixel more. And I think as a student it can be really easy to either not have enough or go way too far. How do you as a professional decide when you need more and when you need to pull back?
There are a couple ways to look at that. The first is if you think about your design as a house of cards. Once you start removing those cards, if it doesn't fall apart, you didn't need them. So that's a really easy way to think about it. Do I need this rule or this decoration? The other way is to, and I've been using this expression for I don't know how many years, is let it be what it wants to be. Not what you want it to be or what I want it to be, because it's never about us. Because our role is not to tell our story. It's to tell the story or the message of our clients. And it's always about the objective of what that issue is at hand. So everything you add as a designer does one of two things. It either distracts from the message or adds to the message. So it's always removing the personal pronoun, the we, the me, and just talking about whatever that objective is. So it's boiling it down on the one hand. I mean, like, I can decorate, but when I add decoration, it usually has maybe some deeper meaning that maybe isn't apparent at first. So that's something that you'll see something at one distance. For instance, just think about a poster. A poster is supposed to work from across the street. You see, for instance here, this says good, and you can read that from across the way. And if the word good appeals to you, then you take a step closer. And then you come a step closer and it says by airmail. Oh, I can read that. Well, then in the finer type it says par avion. Okay, wait a second, second language. What's going on here? And then you start looking at all these other details. So if it can draw you and engage you, then it starts to inform you differently. Because if it was just good, you'd be like, oh, good, okay, that's all I need. So I think design can work on several different levels, if you can work on several different levels. And at the same time, don't condescend to an audience to think that they can't. I used to work down the road at WCVB TV, and it was, when it came to advertising, because of the pinhead who was in charge of promotion, everything was about the lowest common denominator. I was like, we can't condescend to these people, they know how to read a book. So don't undersell your audience. That had nothing to do with your question. I've got a question for you. What's it say in your arm right there?
Oh, unfortunately it doesn't really mean much.
Is that lettering?
Yes, it's
in what
Tibetan.
language? It's Tibetan, so is it in Urdu?
No, it's just Tibetan.
Just straight up Tibetan?
Yeah, and it's a mantra, so if you think of the sound Om,
I know
it doesn't
Om.
really mean anything, so this is the green Tara mantra.
Let's hear it.
So Om Tare, Tu Tare, Ture Swaha.
And it means?
You're just kind of invoking the goddess Tara in order to help guide you through
So
meditation.
what were Tara's key qualities?
Compassion.
Uh-huh.
Compassion and kindness.
Excellent, excellent. And you know Shiva?
I do.
God of
I don't know that.
destruction
Okay.
and creation.
Okay.
Your turn.
So sort of a segue from the previous question is how do you marry designer personal style and client vision? Because it seems that a lot of times the things can be at odds with one another.
The key word there is marry. I don't believe in marriage. I do believe in commitment, however. Some marriages were not meant to be. So you're talking about how do you marry, or how does the designer commit to the client's vision? Most clients, you will find out, are idiots. 5 to 7% actually have vision, and the rest want, they don't know what they want. They think, yeah, they don't know what they want. They think that a website might be the answer when maybe they really need to have a new position or a different name. Going back to what I said earlier, it's not our job to tell our story. And much like what I was talking about earlier regarding my journals, they're not sketchbooks. These are all my experiences. And my experiences involve being in places, whether it's, seeing political stuff or socioeconomic, being and living in somebody's home for a weekend who doesn't speak English in Morocco, and understanding the people and the cultures, going back to caring. Didn't it say caring was part of your thing there?
Yeah.
See, it all comes down. And one of the words that's being kicked around, by the way, today is the 1st of February, 2016, and the word for the year is empathy. And that's been making the rounds for the past year in terms of corporate design being empathetic. And that's always been the case, although I've just used the word caring. So what you need to do is you need to care about what your client does. If you don't, I gotta go. Unless you just care about the money, then it's just a job. But if you can truly invest your caring in what they do, so you start to embed yourself with their way of thinking, and then, be intel and gather as much information from them, then your job is to serve them. So knowing what I do about not just design, but about cultures, you've got to understand what their culture is. So if they are an academic institution, their culture is going to be radically different than a software company. It's going to be radically different than a company that makes water bottles. So you have to understand how those things work and how they come together, and then your work should serve that. So there's a writer, James Michener, and he died maybe a decade ago. He'd written hundreds and hundreds of books, or if not hundreds and hundreds, at least 100. His very first novel made him enough money that he never had to work again. It was called Tales of the South Pacific. He wrote it when he was in the military in the Pacific in the Second World War. It then became the musical South Pacific. Once Rodgers and Hammerstein turned that into a musical, his money was made for life, but he kept writing, kept writing, and kept writing. So I designed a poster for him when he was Writer of the Month, Writer of the Year, in Texas in 2004. And he said that he still writes at the age of 80 for the same reason he did at 40. To imagine yourself sitting around the campfire, and his job is to tell the stories of the other people around the campfire, not his own, to talk about their prowess and how they did things. And he said, the job of an apple tree is to bear apples. He said, I'm a storyteller. That's what I got to do. So as designers, we create, but it's at crossroads of commerce and art for somebody else's story. So you've got to remove enough of your ego to say, I hate the color red, but maybe red is exactly what, not what the client needs, but what the client's audience needs. So it's a...
I love that idea of being a designer as visual storyteller.
But that's what it is, going back to the caves. Now you had your storytellers who'd be walking along saying, don't step on that, that's where the tiger hangs out. But that's what we do. We advertise, here's the migration pattern, here's where this clan did this or where that clan did that, here's where to hunt and gather. The stories are still the same.
Yeah. So as a last question, I kind of like to ask this of anybody. I have the opportunity to be able to...
Boxers or briefs? Well...
No. What is a piece of advice that you wish you would have gotten when you first started out? Whether in design or just life or...
I did get the advice, and I didn't pay attention to it.
Okay.
It was I don't even remember where, all I remember is the fellow who gave us the advice was Robert Miles Runyon. He was a designer from Los Angeles who had made and lost millions. He's essentially the guy who kind of invented the annual report in terms of a branding mechanism. And the only thing I remember, other than the fact that he said he made, you know what, I think it was 1989 in San Antonio AIGA conference, which the theme was Dangerous Ideas. That's exactly where it was. And he said, don't pay attention to fame. Fame will take care of itself. He says, but rich is the bitch, quote unquote. In other words, take care of the money. And for myself, my philosophy has always been, for better and mostly worse, I've never wanted to be the world's best designer. Or, that never even entered my thinking. Well, all I ever wanted was just opportunities to do good design. So what happens when you have opportunities to do good design? You'll just take them. So when I think about my days at Mass Art, the fine art students, we were talking about fine art earlier, the fine arts looked at graphic designers and advertisers as prostitutes. But I was in the field for about 7 years, and I figured, aha, no, they were wrong. At least in terms of the designers. The advertisers are people in advertising are prostitutes. And why is that? Because prostitutes get paid. Designers are sluts. We love what we do, and we just want to do it all the time, and it's got nothing to do with money. You give me the opportunity to fuck around and do some design, sign me up. So I will take those opportunities. Always, look, I've been doing this 30 years. If you call me up, anybody calls me, the first thing I think about is, oh, I know what I could do for them. I could do this, this, and this, and this is how it would work. And we put it on the cave wall, and boom, and everybody understands it. And it's not until 24 hours later I think, oh, yeah, we didn't talk about budget. So I would leave you with, mind the money, because it's a business.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Thank you very much.
There you go.